Gotta stop him.
There's always more to the story.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
And there's always more to say.
Don't ever bring that nonsense in here again.
When going too far feels closer.
Maybe I overdid it.
This space thrives on the restricted. This is the Restricted Area with Robert Guerra.
That's right. Episode number 7 of the Restricted Area podcast for Recliner Media with me, Robert Guerra. Rob G, if you're nasty. Once again, want a quick housekeeping. Thank you so much for everybody who tuned into episode 6, the Chris Broussard episode. Last I checked, it was the most watched YouTube video in Recliner Media history. So thank you so much to you guys for tuning in. Thank you to CB for stopping by. And he already said he's going to come by again if things go well, if they get the Emmy. So, we'll see. I don't want to waste too much time with the shenanigans, the intro and things like that, because I got so much to get to, so little time. And I mean that because I legitimately have things I got to do today and I'm on a time crunch. So I want to dive right into it. And the first story I'm going to get to today, as I'm sure you know, the Clippers were eliminated in the play-in game after melting down in the fourth quarter against Steph Curry and the Warriors. Draymond Green put on a defensive clinic on Kawhi Leonard. And after the loss, after I made my jokes and Chris Paul got his jokes off about the Clippers, I'm a Lakers fan. So of course I'm going to poke them while they're down, right? The reality starts to set in about what's next for this future era of Clippers basketball. And of course, all signs point to Kawhi Leonard. He's 35, entering the last year of his deal. And it's looking increasingly likely that Kawhi has played his final game in a Clippers uniform. And to that, I say, good riddance. The Kawhi era in Los Angeles has been an unmitigated disaster. Now, first, let's jump in the hot tub time machine, all right? Shout out Tom Looney. He used to say that expression a lot back in the day on Fox. All right, during Kawhi's recruitment in the summer of 2019, his Uncle Dennis, I'm sure you guys have heard of him, made several requests to any team interested in acquiring him. In this case, it was the Clippers, the Lakers, or the hometown Raptors who was going to re-sign with him. And it was widely reported then by friend of the show, Chris Broussard, and others. This is what they were looking for. Number 1, you got to get Paul George. Number 2, part ownership of whatever team he signs with. Number 3, access to a private plane. Number 4, a house. And number 5, guaranteed off-court endorsement money. Outside of the Paul George thing, of course, all of those things are illegal, but hey, you can only ask, and the worst they can say is no, right? In addition to that, other outlets reported here were some other things that Kawhi Leonard was looking for in his next team. Number 1, he wanted to live in San Diego rather than Los Angeles, and that he would commute either using the private plane or more likely a helicopter. Number 2, he wanted the freedom to skip media obligations and team community events. So like, when the Clippers or the Lakers or the Nuggets, whoever your favorite team is, hey, we're going to go out in the community. We're going to plant trees. We're going to clean up sidewalks. He's like, I'm good. I don't want to do all that. All right. Number 3, a promise that he would be marketed individually outside of the rest of the team. Now, that's not really unusual because that's kind of what happens to the best player on the team. You've seen that now. Again, I'm a Lakers fan. LeBron was marketed differently. AD was marketed differently. And now Luka is marketed differently. So that's not really unusual. That one's not really a deal breaker to me. And last but not least, to be able to bring some of his own people into the organization. Again, not unusual. We see that a lot. Again, bring it back to my Lakers. LeBron James is famous for doing this, right? So this is not, it's kind of par for the course. Now, did the Clippers, when they ultimately got Kawhi Leonard to sign on the dotted line, concede to some of that? Of course. Did they concede to all of that? We'll never know. But here's what we do know. The big thing that everybody is latched onto is that in order to get Kawhi Leonard, they had to acquire Paul George. And that was going to be set up for the next super team of that era. It was going to be Kawhi and PG with the Clippers, LeBron and AD with the Lakers, Kyrie and KD with the Nets. And like that was going to be a bunch of dynamic duos all across the NBA. And we're going to see who is what's what. So to get Paul George, as I'm sure you all know, the Clippers essentially gave up. It's just crazy now that it's kind of played out in real time and we see exactly what it's gone for. To acquire Paul George, the Clippers gave up soon to be two-time MVP Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the first-round pick that became All-NBA wing Jalen Williams, a first-round pick that became, potentially this season at least, all-defensive team guard in, oh my gosh, his name is Cason Wallace, Nikola Topic, who, is dealing with some health issues. We'll see about that. Another lottery pick this year. Looks like it's going to be 11 or 12. Could potentially jump higher. We'll see. And 2 more pick swaps. Okay, so we know that that's been given up already. That's one thing. What we also know is that since 2019, since the recruitment started of Kawhi Leonard, the Clippers have faced 2 separate lawsuits alleging tampering involving Kawhi, one of which, as we know, is ongoing. We'll get to that later. They've been fined at least twice, not once, but twice by the NBA for violations of league rules, again, involving Kawhi Leonard. And there have been at least not 1, not 2, but 3 investigations, the latest of which just began a couple of months ago into the Clippers involving Kawhi Leonard. That's something that we know. That is factual. Here's another thing that we know. One of those investigations that is ongoing, or the big one that's ongoing, that is, involves a company called Aspiration. If you're a fan of the Paulo Torre podcast, you know all about it, but just a quick summary. The Clippers, using Aspiration, allegedly, we got a key word here is alleged, because until it's been proven, we can't say one way or the other, allegedly funneled an extra $28 million to Kawhi as part of a sham endorsement deal in order to circumvent the salary cap. And when I say sham endorsement deal, I really mean sham endorsement deal. If you read the contract, or at least the way Pablo Torre presented it, part of the agreement was that Kawhi did not have to do anything to get this money. Now, I don't know about you, but when I endorse something, or I've been told that when you endorse something, you have to say something positive, do some kind of ad read, show up at an event, do something like it, do a photo shoot. And according to their reporting, Kawhi explicitly said, I want to endorse Aspiration or get an endorsement deal from Aspiration, but I do not have to talk about Aspiration. I do not want to do a commercial for Aspiration. I don't want to show up at Aspiration. All I want is my money. Okay. Again, allegedly. And so if the NBA can prove that the Clippers did in fact do something illegal in order to circumvent the salary cap, in order to get Kawhi Leonard into a Clippers uniform, The Athletic is reporting that the NBA could decide to punish the Clippers by doing one of 4 things, or maybe even all 4 things. But here's what they could do. Fine them up to $7.5 million, which seems like the most obvious minimal thing that they're going to do. Number 2, this is, again, increasingly likely, strip them of future draft picks, which we'll get to later with that one, because they have a whole nother draft pick situation we got to worry about. Number 3, suspend members of the front office or even owner Steve Ballmer, because ultimately the buck stops with him. That one, again, increasingly more likely, or less likely than the first 2, but possible. And last but not least, the bombshell, the one that, like the nuclear option, if they decide to go this route, will be to void Kawhi Leonard's contract. Now, it doesn't look as bad now because, as I mentioned, he only has 1 year left on his deal, but still telling him you got to forfeit, what, like $50 million. It's not chump change, right? I don't care how rich you are. And so the Clippers went through all of that, all these demands, all these negotiations, all of this alleged fraud to get Kawhi Leonard. And what did they get for their troubles? It's been there for 7 seasons. Throughout 7 seasons, Kawhi averages 47 games played per year. Of course, 1 year he missed entirely. That kind of lowers the number, but still, 47 games a season, not great. They've gotten exactly 3 playoff series wins. They also have 3 first-round exits. They've missed the playoffs altogether twice. And last but not least, they don't control their own pick until 2030. Woo! That's that talk about a terrible return on investment, right? That is just a colossal failure, a neutron bomb blew up in their face as soon as they made this deal with Kawhi Leonard. And then here's the other thing. Something I have an issue with. Nobody is really going to hold Kawhi Leonard's feet to the fire. Even with this aspiration deal, people are more upset at the Clippers because they did something nefarious, and less people are focused on Kawhi Leonard. In fact, on the radio show I produce for Fox Sports Radio, The Odd Couple with Rob Parker and Calvin Washington, Rob Parker has said repeatedly, and we've disagreed on and off the air about it, but he said repeatedly, I have no issue with Kawhi Leonard trying to circumvent the salary cap because all he can do is ask for it. It's up to them to say yes or no. And again, I disagree with that line of thinking, but it does make sense, right? So nobody's going to hold his feet to the fire. And this is something that bothers me because everything that we or you or they or whoever claims to hate about LeBron James, right? The diva tendencies, the GM aspect of things, him being kind of two-faced, right? Like that's the narratives about him. That's Kawhi Leonard. All of it, all of those things that you claim to hate about LeBron James, that is Kawhi personified. But because he's quiet, because he doesn't talk, because he's socially awkward, nobody wants to call him out on it. It's like they feel like because he's like a mute and he's so kind of, like I said, awkward, it makes you feel like you're making fun of a kid in a wheelchair, right? And I don't mean to disparage anybody who's handicapped, but it's like because he doesn't want to fight back or defend himself, or because he's not vocal about everything, you kind of feel off-putting to ridicule him in a way that you would ridicule someone like a LeBron or a KD or even a James Harden, right? And I just think that's disappointing, man, because, Kawhi Leonard is a grown man. Kawhi Leonard makes grown man decisions. And the decisions he made back in 2019 that led to him going to the Clippers, number one, hurt a lot of fans because obviously this thing has backfired in a big way. He was always hurt. They never lived up to the potential. They blew a 3-1 lead in the bubble, right? It cost folks a lot of money, right? Obviously, aspiration, $28 million. It's looking like Steve Ballmer's going to get fined at a minimum for his role in this whole situation. And it set the franchise back for years because, number one, they trade all the draft picks. They don't have rights to those. And in order to get themselves out of this purgatory that they're stuck in, where it's like one and done or even not making the playoffs altogether, they kept having to go into hog and make bad deal after bad deal to try to save face, right? So their franchise gets set back several years. I just wish someone would point that out other than me. But hey, street lights over spotlights, right? Stupid. It's the dumbest marketing campaign ever. All right, real quick on this another NBA topic before I get to some Dianna Russini comments that I have. I'm sure you guys know the NBA has decided that they were going to execute the extraordinary circumstances clause to allow Luka Doncic and Cade Cunningham to be eligible for end of season awards, even though they did not reach the 65 game minimum. Now, as you know, Luka played 64 games in the regular season before he got hurt. And they determined that since 2 of the games that he missed were due to the birth of his child overseas, that they would overlook that and he'd be okay. And that Cade Cunningham, who played 63 games, because he missed 12 games in March due to a collapsed lung, they were willing to overlook that and make him eligible. And interestingly enough, this was kind of buried in that story. Anthony Edwards, who played 60 games, appealed his case to an arbitrator and had his denied. Now, I'm saying this as someone who hates the 65 game rule. I think it's stupid. I've written about it for Recliner Media. I've talked about it on this podcast. I talked about it last week with Chris Broussard. I hate the 65 game rule. I do not understand how you can trust someone like Chris Broussard to vote for awards that impact players' legacy, that impact players financially, and yet you do not trust their judgment enough to consider games played when it comes to making these kind of votes. I do not understand that. I'm sure Chris Broussard, as we talked about last week, is smart enough that he could read between the lines and determine whether or not, 60 games of Anthony Edwards is inherently more valuable than 75 games of Karl Anthony Towns. Like, I feel like Chris could figure that out, right? And again, I hate this rule. I can't stress that enough. But speaking as someone who hates the rule, what are we doing here? That was the dumbest ruling I could possibly imagine by the NBA. If you're going to have a rule like this, you got to stick with it. What's the old expression? Like, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Like, that's Adam Silver and the NBA in a nutshell. Like, again, Laker fan, Luka Doncic. We know you missed 2 games for the birth of your child. We're going to go ahead and give you credit for that. That is the definition of an extraordinary circumstance. But you also were suspended a game because you got too many technicals. So Luka, unfortunately, you couldn't keep your mouth shut. You're not going to be qualified for 65 games. Like, that's, sorry. It's the way it is. And the more egregious part of it, again, I'm a Laker fan who just said that if I'm running things, then if I'm making this rule that Luka's not going to qualify. But the one that's really egregious is what they did to Anthony Edwards. How the hell can you say that Cade Cunningham's injury is in an extraordinary circumstance, but Anthony Edwards is not? Make that make sense. An injury is an injury. Look, I know a collapsed lung is unusual and it's really tough and it's scary. Like, I know enough people and I've known enough about that injury to know that it's different, right, than a sprained ankle. But Anthony Edwards' knee infection was scary too. Like, why is that get dismissed, but the lung gets propped up? I mean, Steph Curry's runner's knee, he said himself that the scans come back clean. Structurally, it's fine, but I have throbbing pain all the time. I'm sure that gives you cause for concern. And if you want to bring it back to the Lakers again, LeBron James sciatica. Like, that is in the NBA, especially, that is the definition of an extraordinary circumstance because most NBA players are not old enough to have a sciatica issue. How are you going to tell someone, a professional athlete, one of your marquee players, these are all star players. This is not back end of the rotation, sixth man types. These are all franchise level superstars. How can you tell them that one injury is more extraordinary than the other? It's stupid. Again, the latest in a long line of Adam Silver missteps. And if I had more time today, I'd get into all of it, but it was really the most ridiculous ruling that I have ever seen. All right, I'm going to do one more topic here before I get to the mailbag, because the mailbag was a big hit, and I want to try to make it in at least every 2 to 3 weeks if possible. But I want to close my big segments with this one. The Dianna Russini situation. As I'm sure you all know because you're sports fans, so I'm sure you consume this kind of content. But if you're not a sports fan, I'm sure you saw this too because it was being covered by People Magazine, CNN, the real TMZ, not even TMZ Sports. Like, everybody was on this one. This was the perfect storm of, scandal, sex, salaciousness, everything, right? Infidelity. But to sum it up, Dianna Russini from The Athletic NFL reporter resigned from The Athletic less than a week after published photos of her and Patriots head coach Mike Vrabel getting cozy, that's the word we'll use, at an Arizona couples resort became public. Now, you'll recall the first thing they did when this came out, which was not unusual, kind of par for the course, deny. That wasn't me. This is laughable. Or they didn't say it wasn't me. They said the pictures taken out of context. There were multiple people there. Any insinuation that there was anything nefarious going on is laughable, right? However, once The Athletic said that they were going to start an investigation, not just into this Mike Vrabel situation, but into all of Russini's reporting with the company, you knew that it was all downhill, right? Like, once with anything and with anybody, if you dig deep enough, you're going to find something. It might not be exactly what you're looking for. It might not be as egregious of what you hope it would be, but you're going to find something. So as soon as they said, we're not just going to investigate Vrabel. We're going to investigate everything you've done. You knew that it was only a matter of time before the two sides would separate. So she resigns. And obviously the first question is like, well, why? If you're innocent, why are you resigning? So I remember at the time that this happened, I was racking my brain. I was trying to figure out why she would do that if, as she says, she's innocent. And I could only come up with 3 logical conclusions as to why she would take this tact. Number one, she knew she was going to get fired. Like she knew that they had decided, or the writing was on the wall, they were going to move on. So she decides to resign to save face. That's like the most obvious logical answer. Number 2, she figures that if she resigns, the investigation into her previous reporting outside of this Vrabel issue would stop. And we come to find out that was not the case at all, because The Athletic has already said they will continue investigating the Vrabel incident and all the previous reporting, even after she left the company. They are going to continue to invest man hours and money into this investigation, probably because they feel like their reputation as a news gathering company is at stake here. And last but not least, the third reason I figured that what was going through her mind as to why she might want to resign and do this is because she wanted to get a head start on the next phase of her career. Like if I quit now, I stay out of sight, out of mind, I lay low for a bit through the draft, through the summer. I can independently cover training camps or the start of the season on Substack. A lot of people do it, make some good money doing that. I can do some freelance work, some podcast appearances with guys like Dan Le Batard or Stu Gatz. Like Stu Gatz has already said that if she's let go and she can't find a job, he'll hire her. So he's like, that's apparently available as soon as she wants it. And then if she does all that stuff, this time next year, she's back working for a major outlet. I don't know if it's Fox, ESPN, but someone, there's a lot of media companies out there nowadays. And, now that the gambling sites have sponsored so many, you got FanDuel, you got DraftKings, you got Playmaker, you got Underdog. There's so many available. I would not be surprised if she landed on her feet somewhere. Which brings me to my second point about this whole situation. I completely 1000% disagree with people who say that her credibility is shot and she'll never work as an NFL insider again. I do not mean to downplay what she did and allegedly to have done, both of them, cheating on their spouses, having an affair, and that being, her allegedly having a romantic relationship with one of the subjects she is supposed to be reporting on is 1000% a conflict of interest. So I'm not trying to downplay that. I admit that wholeheartedly. But as someone who works in sports media and has worked in sports media for almost 15 years now, this business is so incestuous, it would make you sick. And I can tell you that firsthand. The things that I've seen people do or say behind closed doors as a way to, quid pro quo, I think that's the expression, right? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of situation, happens all the time. And I'm not just talking about like the tweets there where it's like, Joe Smith has signed a 4-year, $80 million deal as negotiated by Mike Jones of Clutch Sports. Like that alone tells you something. Because if you're really trying to report something, what's the point of including the agent's information, right? Unless you're doing them a favor, unless you're trying to get the word out that, Joe Smith of Clutch Sports negotiates better deals or that he gets his clients more money. And this is my way of doing PR for him in exchange for stories down the line. I'm not even just talking about that. I'm talking about some of your favorite NFL insiders, some of the most prominent voices in the NFL who cover the NFL at a high level have been, I don't know if caught is the right word, but it's been very public knowledge that they have very close relationships with the people that they are supposed to be covering. Adam Schefter, as you all know, was sending emails to the then Redskins GM for final approval. I think he even called him Mr. Editor in some leaked emails that went public. As far as I know, Adam Schefter is still the top dog, still the big man at ESPN. All right. Peter Schrager, formerly NFL Network, now at ESPN, was a guest at Sean McVay's wedding. I don't know about you, but the guys and the people that weddings I've been in, I tend to, have an affinity for, and I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt in a lot of situations. So I would assume that we can't expect Peter Schrager to be 1000% objective about Sean McVay. That's just my opinion. Even at Fox, Jay Glazer goes on vacations with a lot of these guys. Like, this is open knowledge. You follow his Instagram. I'm sure you just saw the viral day drinking photo he had at the annual coaches meeting. Like, are you sure? And I'm not saying that Jay's not a good reporter. What I'm saying is, you mean to tell me that he can be 1000% objective and report anything negative or that he sees, or not share information from one person to another, and yet be able to go day drinking with all these coaches? Like, when I went to school, and I went to journalism school, I was told that the role of the media is to observe and report. Never says go to wedding, go to vacations, day drinking, send your source a draft of the article. I was never taught that. And I have a degree in journalism. So journalism integrity, as we think we know it, does not exist anymore. There is no separation of church and state. Everybody is in bed with everybody. Maybe not in the way that Dianna Russini and Mike Vrabel allegedly, but you understand what I'm trying to say, right? This is going to blow over, just like every other scandal we've ever seen in the last few years has blown over. She'll be back covering the NFL at a high level, just like she always has. Give it a few months, maybe a year. You'll be getting tweets, alerts saying, scoop, NFL insider Dianna Russini reports X, Y, and Z. Okay, I'm just telling you. I want to close here with the mailbag. Again, I'm trying to do this every 2 or 3 weeks because you guys seem to like it, and I do get a lot of feedback in my DMs at the producer RG, both on X and on Instagram. So with that said, it's time for the mailbag.
You've got mail.
Oh my God, I'm your biggest fan.
It's time for some fan mail.
I love that we have sounders. I love that we got sounders on this show. All right, here we go. Number one, I'll get through maybe 3 or 4 of these. Again, I got some stuff I got to do here. Alex says, what do you think about that whole thing with Paige Beckers and AZ Fudd? That's a very good question. First off, let me just say that I have no issue with players being romantically involved with each other. As long as you're not a subordinate, I think that's where we have an issue, like we saw with Ime Udoka with Boston there, and what we saw with Sharon Moore in Michigan. If you are equal, I have no issue with it whatsoever. What I will say, though, is this, that this specific situation could get weird, if only because they're both viewed as franchise players. Like we've seen, again, this is a little bit apples to oranges, but we've seen in other sports, even in the NBA, right? Doc Rivers at one point was coaching Seth Curry. Seth Curry is married to Doc Rivers' daughter. So that is his son-in-law. Thankfully, nothing bad came about it. As far as I know, they left on good terms when Seth ended up, I think, got traded to another team. And there was never any issues, as far as we know, with Seth on the team with his father-in-law. But had there been an issue, because Seth Curry, all due respect to him, is just a rotational player, that he's not viewed as one of the stars or wasn't viewed as one of the stars of the team. If things really went sideways, they could easily cut bait, move on, trade him, get him out of town, separate him and Doc, and you'd be just fine, right? What Dallas has going for them here with Beckers and Fudd is that these two are both supposed to be face of the franchise type talents. This is supposed to be their version of Stephen Clay. This is supposed to be the duo that leads them to the highest heights of the WNBA. So if they're still dating, which I believe they are, and if, God forbid, something goes sideways where they can't, coexist because they broke up or they're having a fight or whatever, and they can't coexist within that locker room and on that team, it is not going to be easy to move on from that at all. Like, you are not going to be able to just be like, all right, well, Paige and AZ are having an issue. We got to get one of them out of town. Let's just trade Paige. Well, no, it's not that easy because Paige Beckers is awesome. Well, let's go ahead and we'll trade AZ then. Well, AZ was number one pick for a reason. Like, this is not the same, again, apples to oranges, as if you have Giannis and Thanasis Antetokounmpo in Milwaukee, and things to go bad between them, well, we're obviously keeping Giannis because Thanasis is just, along for the ride. Both of these ladies are supposed to be, marquee talents. So again, I have no issue with them seeing each other. Do what you want to do. The issue becomes if, God forbid, something goes wrong, good luck trying to sort through that. All right. Question number 2 from Pablo. How'd you like what Zay Flowers said about John Harbaugh? Okay. So if anyone forgot what happened with them, Zay Flowers said on a podcast that he had an issue with John Harbaugh practicing them with pads throughout the season, late into the season. And he said that's why they got hurt. Now, full disclosure, I have not seen the whole episode. I've only seen the viral clip. So if he addressed this part later, then, my mistake. First thing I'm going to say is you can't win a boxing match without sparring. I believe that. A lot of former athletes believe that if you want to be good at a sport, especially a contact sport like football, you have to absorb contact. It's going to prepare you for late in the season, late in games, late in the playoffs, to have, what do they say? Like the callus built up in your body that you can withstand that kind of punishment and keep moving forward. And the other thing I'll add to that is, and shout out to Jeff Schwartz, who said this on Twitter, and I saw him and I want to give him credit for that. You're only allowed 14 practices or 14 padded practices all season. And you're only allowed 3 after week 11, according to the NFLPA agreement. So for Zay Flowers to make it seem like, well, we did too much padded practice, like 3 times in the last 6 weeks is a lot to you. Like, what are we doing? And the last thing I'll say, and again, I have not watched the full podcast, so he could have clarified this, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say the padded practices and the injuries, again, you might have been legitimately hurt. Everybody legitimately hurt at that point of the season, week 17 into the playoffs. That's not the reason why the Ravens have not lived up to expectations, right? Let's not forget Zay Flowers, the guy who made this comment, fumbled a would-be touchdown through the back of the end zone for a touchback in the fourth quarter of the 2024 AFC Championship game, in a game the Ravens lost by 7 points. I think that touchdown, would have helped. The very next season, Mark Andrews drops a game-tying 2-point conversion in the final minute of a 2-point loss to the Buffalo Bills in the divisional round. Their would-be kicker last season, or excuse me, the rookie kicker, the rookie kicker last season, missed a chip shot field goal that would have won them the division and gave them a home game in the playoffs. And last but not least, the quarterback. I'm a big Lamar Jackson fan, but let's be honest, keep it 100. Keep it a buck. Since entering the NFL in 2018, Lamar Jackson's 11 playoff turnovers are the most in the NFL. So I think that Zay Flowers, with all due respect, maybe y'all needed more practices. Okay. Because the things that happened to you in the postseason obviously had nothing to do with padding and had to do with concentration and lack of fundamentals. And those are things you usually iron out in practice. All right. Again, I'm really late. I want to get through a couple of more of these. Number 3, Adrian says, besides Fernando Mendoza, the Raiders, what do you think will happen at the draft? I got one for you. The one that I'm really keeping an eye on, and the one I think is going to happen, maybe not in round 1, but I think the Steelers are going to draft their Aaron Rodgers replacement. And ownership has said they believe the answer on whether or not Rodgers will come back would come before the draft, that they basically put a soft deadline in place that says we need to know by the draft what you're going to do. And for all the talk about Aaron Rodgers' resurgence last season, they won the division, as I just mentioned, over Baltimore with the missed field goal. He had 24 touchdowns. He had 7 picks. He looked, old, but he looked good. He looked like a middle of the road, top 12 to 15 quarterback in the NFL. He looked fine. Having said that, did you see the playoff game in Houston? 17-33, 146, no touchdowns, a pick 6, and he lost the fumble that was also returned for a touchdown. So not good. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you cannot go into the 2026 season with Aaron Rodgers, your quarterback, or as your only quarterback, right? If he's gonna be there, you have to have somebody in the wings ready to go in. And even if he's not there, you have to have somebody that you're going to build towards moving forward. So to bring it back to the question, I would keep an eye on Drew Aller of Penn State, Carson Beck out of Miami in like rounds 2 or 3 for Pittsburgh. or if they're really feeling squirrely, I don't think it's going to happen, but if they're feeling squirrely and they feel like they really got to make a splash, Mike McCarthy's there as a new regime in Pittsburgh. Maybe you take Ty Simpson late in the first, either by trading down. I think they're picking 21, trade down from there, or maybe you trade up from the second round into the end of the first round, the same way Baltimore did with Lamar Jackson. And that way you get the 5 years of control with him. All right. Again, I'm really late. I'm going to do one more question. Got to get out of here on time. Tommy says, last week you said first things first, the best show in TV. What's the worst? Tommy, you're a jerk. Why do you want to put me in that position? Screw it. I'll say it. Inside the NBA is the worst major show on sports television. Point blank. Chuck and Shaq do not watch the games. They even do a bit called Who We Play For to make fun of the fact that Charles Barkley does not watch the games. What on earth can I learn from that? Not a damn thing. It's entertaining, right? Like, they're funny. Maybe this ESPN version notwithstanding, because they don't get the full like hour and a half length of time to do all the shenanigans and the BS that made them popular. But outside of that, if I want to learn about basketball, if I want to get insight and knowledge, I'm not going inside the NBA. And on top of that, they hate on everything. Everything. Like, Shaq does not like a single big man in the NBA. Even Nikola Jokic, if you recall, there was an interview, I think maybe it was last season, where they interviewed him, and he basically is taking pot shots at the Joker. Like, and Joker's like, oh, he's too classy. Kind of just, okay. Rudy Gobert was moved to tears because of the stuff that Shaq has said about him. Dwight Howard, who's a Hall of Fame big man, hates everything that's about Shaq because of the way he constantly ridiculed him, right? And Charles Barkley doesn't like teams that shoot threes, which, as we know now, the NBA is littered with teams who shoot threes. It is the most, not gonna say common shot, but is the cleanest way to determine whether or not a team has won that game that night. If you didn't watch a game and all you did was look at the box score, if I tell me who made more threes, I'll bet you the vast majority of the time that team won the game. And Chuck has decided, and he's made it very clear for like 7-8 years now, that he does not like teams who shoot threes. Not even the Steph Clay Warriors, who, won multiple championships by shooting threes. So, yes, Tommy, to answer your question, first things first is the best show on sports television. Inside the NBA is the worst. All right, that'll do it for me. I went about 2 minutes longer than I wanted to, but thank you for rocking with me. Make sure you follow the Recliner Media on YouTube. Check out my Instagram. Check out my X, my Twitter, @theproducerRG, both spots. Questions can be sent there as always. Until next time, this has been The Restricted Area with Robert Guerra, Rob G if you're nasty. Peace out.